We're talking about potential successors to Justin Trudeau. And Cole, you're talking about they were all there, but someone who wasn't there at the table was Christy Clark. We don't know if she's actually going to throw in her hat this time around, but she did turn to social media. She congratulated and thanked the Prime Minister for the sacrifices he's made. But take a look at what else she had to say in terms of her assessment of this day. She says this is the biggest opportunity in over a decade that we've had to grow our party and welcome new Liberals, including Canadians concerned about the future of our country. And she goes on to say, let's seize it. And of course, that's Christy Clark, former leader of the BC Liberals, former Premier of British Columbia. So someone that's talking about this opportunity for renewal, the Prime Minister said he's looking forward to a robust process. But how robust can it actually be, given that you're going to look at a contracted process to choose a new leader?
It's going to be very interesting to see who wants to go for the leadership now in this sort of amidst all of this chaos, and who's going to want to wait until late 2026 when we're doing it likely again, and that's going to be the leader who will really be doing the rebuilding. If the polls continue as they are and there's no sort of miraculous recovery, whoever is chosen as leader in this sort of truncated process will likely face electoral defeat and then likely a leadership review. And unless they've done significantly better than expected, there will be another leadership. So I don't know if people want to, maybe a Christy Clark or Mark Carney, do they want to throw their hats in now for the job of opposition leader in Fourth Party, or do they want to wait and be seen as the rebuilding and a new brand?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, the arc of history kind of tells the tale here. If I look at Dion and Ignatieff, and I look at Scheer and O'Toole, I think any Liberal leadership contender has to look at sort of the cycle of these things, where you have 2 or 3 leaders before you make it to the person who can actually contend for power. And I think that the current crop of people that you have isn't going to be able to differentiate themselves from Trudeau whatsoever, especially not anybody in cabinet. And I think, with Christy Clark in particular, you'll see Christy Clark's father was a delegate for John Turner. I can guarantee you that she's going to say something akin to, we need to bring this party back to, the blue Liberal, Chrétien Martin, deficit slaying thing, that party and institution that it used to be. The thing is, the Liberal Party is so far gone from that. That's going to be a tough sell, especially with all of these Trudeau-affiliated leadership contenders in the mix. So we'll see how those two visions clash, and if there's any place for that vision in the Liberal Party.
Mm-hmm. George?
I actually think there's a ton of place for that vision in the Liberal Party. I mean, it is. I've actually heard, there was a podcast where 2 Liberals were talking and mocking the Conservatives for, electing the best Conservative leader, whereas the Liberals, in their words, not mine, try to elect the best leader, and then the party just becomes whatever the leader wants them to be. And I do think there's enough pushback from these years, like from the Liberal base, from these years of Justin Trudeau, that going to the right is totally possible. It's who the Liberals have often been. It's certainly, I became a New Democrat because of Paul Martin's cuts and cut my teeth in the 90s, and that's where I came from. So I think there's lots of room for the Liberals to go that way. I think Christy Clark's an interesting option because I agree with Cole that anyone in cabinet right now, we saw Chrystia Freeland try to distance herself. That's why I think she blew it up so big, was to try to say, I'm not part of this mess. Elect me as leader. It'll be a new day.
And the implication that she was not supportive of a lot of the policies that she essentially introduced in the House.
Exactly, yeah. So I think, Christy Clark might try to make the argument, like, look, we're going to go into this election and we're going to eat it. It's going to suck. But I'll come out of it. We'll come out of it united, and then we'll rebuild from there and try to make the argument that she can punch through that in an election. But I think it's going to be tough. And I think that if they do elect another woman, and it's like Kim Campbell, where, we elect a woman, we have a woman prime minister, and then she gets smoked because of the faults of the man that came before her. That kind of treatment we've seen before. It's the glass cliff that too many women have faced in politics. And I think, not to say that they shouldn't elect a woman for that reason, but I think that is a risk that the Liberals need to contend with and take very seriously as they decide what's next.
Mm-hmm. Okay, to that, let's bring up right now a board of who we see as potential contenders here to succeed Justin Trudeau, because we do have some names floating around. We mentioned Chrystia Freeland, Anita Anand. We know that she has sought it. In fact, she was almost reprimanded for it at the last Liberal convention. Mélanie Joly, Dominic LeBlanc, Mark Carney, François-Philippe Champagne, and Christy Clark, as we mentioned. Is this wide enough a field? Picking up on Cole's point here, Stevie, with maybe the exception of Christy Clark, are these possible contenders too associated with the Liberal government to be able to rebrand it and give it a refresh going into a potential election?
I think the question, and I don't know the answer to it, is how much of this, of the tanking in the polls has been people disliking Trudeau personally, which I think a lot of it was, and how much of it is on the brand. Because I think many of the policies are still popular. I think many of the progressive ideals still resonate with a large, much more than 16% of the population. So it's interesting, taking him out of it, I'd love to see some polling done to see what sort of level of recovery could happen.
Mm-hmm. What do you? Well, I think I know what you think, but you might want to add what you say to that goal.
Well, sure. I think the level of public support. I've seen some polling that had all of those leadership contenders on the board there, polled for their level of recognition with the general public. Whether or not them as the Liberal Party leader would make much of a difference, but I think you've got a long road to go before you can again differentiate yourself from Trudeau and actually say, here's a different vision for the Liberal Party to sell that to Canadians, because this has done some damage across the country and has affected multiple provincial Liberal parties across the country. So when I look at what the status of Liberal parties are, and mostly, I've said this before on this program, it's a blue versus orange country, and if the Liberal Party cannot differentiate itself from its current status as a very left-leaning party, then is there a space for it anymore in terms of the Canadian electorate, the choices they make?
Mm-hmm. What do you think of that, George? Because that is the other option. There will be those that try to fight to bring the Liberals back to what was the Paul Martin Liberals, perhaps more centrist, more centre-right. But then there is also the argument that perhaps it just occupies a space or tries to occupy the space that the NDP does.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can try, and that's what Justin Trudeau's been able to do. I think that Justin Trudeau has built his success, I wrote this morning, on two pillars, basically. One, his personal brand, and two, the boogeyman of the Conservative Party, and saying that he's the only alternative for it. And his personal brand, I think we can all agree, is no longer a pillar that can be helped. In fact, it would be a pretty deep hole. And as far as the boogeyman goes, I think that's where the NDP needs to step up. And frankly, even speaking as a Democrat, they haven't been able to do that yet. Like when you're looking at the New Democrats or the Liberals at 16%, and the New Democrats are still floating around 20%, which is where they've been the whole time, that needs to shift. And so that message needs to come along. And I think if the NDP can do that successfully, it takes away that space for the Liberals. So then the Liberals have to just say, we can be conservative light, right? Like you want smaller budget or smaller deficits, we can do that. And that movement has to happen. Just sitting here thinking, to go back quickly to a question that Ellen Buzzetti asked in the scrum about why not just go to an election. And I think the conversation we're having here makes me think it's a bigger argument, frankly, for an interim leader and an election. I mean, we've all basically agreed that the next leader, unless they can pull off some kind of miracle, as I was suggesting maybe Christy Clark could try, is essentially going to be an interim leader anyway. So we're going to have Justin Trudeau stick around, during a Liberal leadership race, and then go into an election. That Liberal leader is going to get smoked and then have to step down, and then another it's all this about the Liberal Party rather than trying to figure out some continuity for the country. And I think that's going to be a struggle. I think again that is a problem when the whole country is kind of held up while the Liberals try to figure themselves out, and I think that's going to be complicated.